Honorable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central. To firstly follow on, Honorable Minister, from the response of your program manager in terms of speaking of the Job Start program. And of course, I think that all of us, honorable members in this chamber, and I would want to certainly include the honorable leader of the opposition in this regard, recognize that training of our young people is in skills, in having them acquire skills, is an essential part of one of the challenges that we face in this country. And that this is the type of program, and we also have similar programs in the ministry of the Honorable Member for St. John, giving what I like to call a third opportunity to our people, third or even fourth to our young people to develop skills and vocational training so that they can sustain themselves. Of course, we have free education at source in this country, and in particular, free tertiary education, again, at the University of the West Indies and at BCC, which the last Democratic Labour Party administration so horrendously took away from Barbados, and which this administration restored again in June or July, I think it was, 2018. Very shortly after we came back into governance of this country through the now Deputy Prime Minister and Honourable Member for St. Michael's South East as Minister of Education. And I want to suggest, Honourable Minister, that this is a program, this Job Starts program, that we as parliamentarians should even invest more funds and capacity in it. The programs officer spoke about aiming for 350 persons to be trained on an annual basis. And I certainly accept the challenge of the business community in terms of capacity of taking in more persons to get more skills. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central spoke of the challenge there, with the businesses owed almost $2 billion by the previous Democratic administration in VAT arrears and tax refunds. But I am wondering, Honourable Minister, if, and I commend, of course, our member for St. Peter, the thrust towards including persons with disabilities in this program. Of course, that is in the national policy document of the to improve the lives of persons with disabilities that was formulated last year. But I would want to put for your consideration, Honourable Minister, the creation of incentives, and obviously that's the purview of the Ministry of Finance, the creative of incentives to business places to employ more persons in this short-term training program. Could be tax breaks, tax concessions. I'm sure there's enough creativity in the Ministry of Finance, both at the political level and at the technocrat level, to have this done. And in terms of persons with disabilities, training and future employment, that certainly recommendation is within the policy, national policy for persons with disabilities. Because we all recognize, and we hear young people often saying this, that, boy, the job requires someone with experience, but at age 20 or 21, how you expect that I have experience? I might have a qualification, you might have the 5 CXCs, you may even have the associate degree from BCC or the Polytechnic, but how are you going to have the experience? And if the job requires experience, we have to find a creative way to have our constituents, because these are real people that facing day-to-day challenges, to give them the opportunity. And if that opportunity entails then giving some businesses some kind of incentive to train, help train more of these people, more of our people, more young people, to give them, as I call it, as I said, the third or fourth chance in life. I think that that's what has to be done. But my question, Honorable Chairman, my first question relates to the issue of full freedom of movement of CARICOM nationals on our local labor market. Just last week, an amendment to the CARICOM skills national legislation went through this lower house. I don't believe that it has gone through the Senate yet, to move towards full freedom of CARICOM nationals, something, of course, that was envisaged by the creators of the CARICOM project a long time ago, when we brought in the revised Treaty of Chagaramas almost 20 years ago, sir. And we know, sir, that Barbados has benefited more than any other country in terms of foreign exchange earnings from other CARICOM nations, in terms of our exports exceeding imports from other CARICOM nations, and in terms of goods, but also in terms of services, sir. A higher percentage of Barbadians have gone to other CARICOM countries from pre-colonial time, from pre-independence times, and found employment in other countries. And this is of benefit to us, and I commend the administration. I was not here last week to participate in the debate, sir. I was overseas, but I saw, for example, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition speak towards the impact of labor, how this amendment would impact labor, sir, in Barbados. And so there's no question of that, because the Caribbean Congress of Labor has been involved in these discussions from the start of this CARICOM project, sir. So I'm not sure that the Honorable Leader of Opposition was aware of that fact. But Honorable Minister, how do you see, you may wish to comment on my first part in terms of increasing the capacity by creative means for the Job Start program, but also I wish to give you the opportunity to inform the people of Barbados through this Parliament, sir, the impact of full freedom of movement, CARICOM nationals, on our local labor market, and how, sir, it would benefit our people, our citizens, and you know, especially within the context of a situation where right now we have to be importing people even from Colombia, sir, whose first language is not English, to assist in the construction industry, for example. I thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. With respect to the first question on incentives for employers, we have had discussions on this matter. I indicated earlier that we do participate in the provision of stipends for third sector organizations, as well as very small businesses, sole traders, tradespersons, craftspersons. Government participates in assisting in providing stipends for persons employed in those areas. With respect to those in larger businesses who could take larger numbers of persons, we do have a challenge. We continue to appeal to their understanding of their commitment to the country within which they operate and the communities in which they operate. But we have not taken our minds away from the development of some suitable incentive if all else fails. So I want to give the assurance that the ministry is pursuing engagement and is keeping all of its options open with respect to maximizing the number of young people who participate in the program, knowing that there may come the time where even larger businesses that we would maybe intuitively think should be engaging persons almost automatically, we have to reach out to them. We have to make sure that this works. I also want, in answering or speaking to that, mention, because the Honorable Member spoke to training, and I'm going to use that to come to free movement, but particularly with construction, which is the area mentioned by the Honorable Member. We have trained through World of Work training a significantly larger number than those persons who we have placed in the Job Start Plus program. We do not see that training as wasted, even though persons have not benefited from an attachment. That comes out of what has become a stark realization that many of our people do not know how to operate in a work environment and create, in some cases, significant difficulties for other workers and for employers. And so any training that we do, we see it as funds well invested. I started my remarks by saying that it is our intention to account to the public, to Barbadians, on our stewardship. And so we have funds in our estimates for these training programs. And in spite of the fact that we may not be able, or so far, we have not been able to place the 350 per year as is our goal, we continue resolutely on our World of Work training, on our psychosocial counseling, so that young people, whenever the opportunities arise, will be able to take effective grasp of those opportunities. Now, those mindsets really came to the fore in a consultation we had about 3 weeks ago, with the construction sector. And in that sector, there is a cry across size of entities about the quality of worker with respect to skill level, but I think maybe either just as importantly or slightly more importantly, the approach to work. And one of the colleagues here was in that meeting as well. So that is something we have to deal with. But in construction, we've seen, as the Honorable Member indicated, persons from South American countries being involved. And that is because while there are persons in Barbados who are not employed, many of those persons do not want particular jobs. And so even if there are jobs available in specific areas, they are not taking advantage of the opportunities. The Ministry of Labor's philosophy is grounded in a regional philosophy. It understands that Barbados is part of a Caribbean civilization. It recognizes that Barbados cannot develop to its full potential on its own. And so the engaging at the level of free movement across the region, we believe will be beneficial not only to us, but beneficial to the rest of the region. Much of our trade is with the region. When I was wearing another hat previous to being a member of parliament, our fourth largest source market for arrivals, visitor arrivals, was the Caribbean. And so there is a symbiotic relationship that we have to do our part as the ministry responsible for labor and the rest of our portfolio to make sure happens. Now, in that regard, as we speak to rights of persons, have been developing, and the Chief Labor Officer has been leading on this, revising a migrant labor protocol so that we are clear as to the rights as to responsibilities, as to protections for persons who are coming to our shores. We do not envisage in our ministry that there will be, for example, an emptying out of a neighboring country and all the persons coming to Barbados. We know what the situation is with respect to Haiti, and I think the chamber knows, and maybe some in the public do, know that Haiti is not part of this iteration of full free movement. So we are not of the view that there will be damage done to the labor market, to the local labor market by full free movement of CARICOM nationals. All member states are working toward putting whatever structures need to be put in place so that we can monitor and so that we can assess. This ministry, like the broader government that it is a part of, is never of the view that a step may necessarily be perfectly executed on the first step. But we believe that first steps have to be made. If we recognize at any point that we have to modify the step, then we will do that. We're prepared to do that because that is what good governance, good management is about. You make the best decision possible at that point in time, and when there is further information and all is well, you continue. If adjustments have to be made, we continue. But we see no challenge with the matter of full free movement of CARICOM nationals across CARICOM member states.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and I wish to place on record, my agreement with the thrust of the Job Start or Job First program in terms of its cohorts, as enunciated by the program manager. Cohorts such as anger management, conflict resolution, teamwork, proper attitude towards work. All those are so important in today's age. The honorable members, especially of the city and St. John, attended the opening of very similar program that I have and I'm conducting right now every Saturday among my constituents through my foundation, the Clarkson Foundation Inc. That's what we've been doing for the last 10 years because these are so important, and I think the Honorable Minister of Education as well would agree because I know that her ministry within its capacity to reform education in this country, to transform it, in fact, is also looking at including those very vital aspects in curriculum of our schools, which they ought to have been in there a long time ago, in my submission. But Honorable Minister, I would like you to address your attention in terms of the Employment Rights Tribunal. In your opening, you correctly spoke that justice delayed is justice denied. Not only attorneys at law know that, but even more so ordinary people. And I know that when this administration first took over governance again of this country in 2018, I think there was a backlog of about 269 cases before the Employment Rights Tribunal that had not yet started. I know that figure was decreased. Perhaps I would invite you, Honorable Minister, to say how many cases are now backlogged before the tribunal. But I wish to give you the opportunity to speak in more detail as to the plans in terms of policy for that tribunal. You spoke about consideration being given to 2 full-time tribunals. I certainly will support that, sir. It is difficult to have just part-time attorneys, attorneys at law who are in practice, being chairpersons of these tribunals. And of course, the legislation says that the chair, correctly so, has to be an attorney at law of at least 7 years experience. And I speak as well as a former chairman, long time ago, 30 years ago, of Severance Payments Tribunal. It is difficult to fundamentally decrease the backlog of the cases before the tribunal by just having attorneys at law who are also practicing. So I support the consideration, and certainly I would wish to urge the move to have 2 full-time tribunals, to have a locality for the tribunal, sir. And we know that the immediate past chairman of the tribunal spoke publicly on that need to give support in terms of the technical aspect to these tribunals, because they're so important. Someone who has been allegedly unfairly dismissed from their employment, they're out of work for a good few months, they need compensation. And they not only need a judgment by the tribunal in their favor if the facts on the balance of probabilities so lend themselves towards, but they need the award too. So question of enforceability of the award needs to be looked at within a 2 or 3 month period, sir. And if the award isn't paid within that time, interest to accrue on the quantum of the award. We know that the tribunal is without an appointed chairman. So I'm assuming, sir, and I give you the opportunity to speak towards that, when chairman, substantive chairman, may be appointed, so that the work of what is an extremely important tribunal within the legislation, it has the power and authority of the magistrate's court, can be running at full speed again, and where the matters, claims of our constituents before this tribunal for wrongful dismissal could be adjudicated on, and where appropriate, our constituents can be paid their just compensation under the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, and one more intervention after this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member. That was quite a long one. So I'm going to answer what I think is the essence of what you were referring to. I think at the beginning you spoke to the need, but maybe this was not your question, but it gives me an opportunity to say something. Following on from the work we are doing in training young people for work, we recognize that there are psychosocial issues, and it seems some mental health issues as well. And in addition to the work being done by the unit with this training, we've also reached out to the Ministry of Education, the ministry responsible for education, and members of our faith-based organizations have, for some years now, volunteered their services, and we are awaiting the Ministry of Education's finalizing of the terms, the structure, how this will work. But it is absolutely important, and I think it's necessary to actually mention it here. There are too many issues out there with our young workers, and the ministry is grateful that the honourable member who just spoke is in his own way assisting in the effort. But we are dealing with it both from the employment perspective, but also from the perspective of our responsibility for religious affairs. With respect to the Employment Rights Tribunal, the Chamber should be informed that Cabinet has approved drafting instructions for rules that would assist in the good functioning of the Employment Rights Tribunal. Those drafting instructions, are before the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. We have been given the assurance that we will get the first draft in the not too distant future, meaning before the end of this fiscal year. So in another few weeks, we should have the rules, the first draft, and as is our custom, those rules as a bill, which is probably what it will be shared with our partners, and our partners will have the ability to make input. I should probably say, given my recent experience with persons in and out of this chamber using a first draft that goes for discussion, to say that that is where we are at. I just want to caution all that when we put out a draft, that is what it is. It will be a draft. It may not be fully what we want, but the draft is to allow for discussion. That draft will be published in the not too distant future. The matter of the appointment of a tribunal chair at the moment, now the structure is 1 chair, 2 deputy chairs. Each of those 3 persons chairs a tribunal. At the moment, there are 2 tribunal chairs working and delivering judgments. As a matter of fact, we had one very recently on, I think it was our first discrimination case. And that was, persons would have seen that in the media. Replacing the substantive chair will take place within the context of moving to a full-time tribunal. We have to get the final decision on that. We have discussed it both internally and with the Ministry of Finance. The ultimate decision comes as a cabinet decision. We are in the final stages of preparing that cabinet paper, and that cabinet paper will go to the cabinet. But based on our preliminary discussions, we are of the view that the cabinet is ad idem with us on the matter that we need to move to a full-time tribunal, sufficient that that decision is made. Then it influences our recruitment of chairs. It makes no sense recruiting at this point when we're so close to moving to a full-time, where a full-time will have a different time requirement than part-time, as is the case at the moment. We are also working toward the location, a location where the tribunal, as it sits, does not have to compete with other ministries in the building. We are in a building at the moment with about 4 other ministries, 3 or 4 other ministries, and 1 large conference room. And so there is the competition for space, and we believe that we're making progress in having our own space. We also believe that this could happen, if not by the end of the fiscal year, the current fiscal year, maybe by the end of April. So these things are coming together. We are also in receipt of a diagnostic that was done by the International Labour Organization on the existing Employment Rights Tribunal. We explored a number of possibilities, including an industrial court, but we decided that a full-time tribunal was what was suited to Barbados. And so the result of the diagnostic, along with the things that I mentioned in this honorable chamber, will form the basis upon which we move forward on the matter of making sure that there is access to labor justice in this country. We publish the results of the cases that were heard. That publication of the cases and the decisions is meant to assist those practitioners of industrial relations in the country so that we can reduce the numbers, so people can make good decisions, so that the precedents are there for the practitioners to see, and we believe that that will also help. I'll ask the Chief Labour Officer to give some information on the actual numbers.
Thank you, Minister. I am Claudette Hope Greenwich, Chief Labour Officer. The Employment Rights Tribunal, looking at the years 2018 to date in 2024, 367 cases were referred for the attention of the tribunal in that period. And of that 367, 45 decisions were delivered. And many of those decisions are contained in the publication, I think that was produced in 2023, forming part of the jurisprudence when it comes to industrial relations matters. 2 decisions are pending, and 17 cases were discontinued after filing. It sometimes occurs that an employee or a claimant would change their mind for various reasons and ask to have their matter discontinued. There was also the case, or there's also the case where 65 matters were discontinued prior to hearing. This is where, as opposed to filing, the matter was arranged, there were arrangements made for hearing, but they were discontinued prior to that. So it means that those 65 cases were at a pretty much advanced stage, but again, for reasons best known to the parties, those would have been discontinued. The tribunal uses the CMC process, the case management process, to good effect, and started doing that around the same 2018, perhaps 2019. And 11 matters were settled at CMC. And this is where the parties, before going to a full hearing, engage with the chairman of the particular panel to discuss matters. And that is a bit similar to conciliation. And at that stage, those 11 matters were settled. As we speak, there are now 11 cases which are active at CMC. And there are 216 cases yet to be started and to be heard at either CMC or full hearing. So that sums up the statistics for that period, 18 to 2024 to date.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and Chief Labor Officer. And I wish to commend the ministry for the publication of the judgments. It constitutes a sound formulation of what essentially the case law before the tribunal is. I took the opportunity on one of my flights, very long flights recently, to read the judgments, and I must say that they were essentially, and in a large part, quite sound. And I was quite impressed with the crafting of the judgments and the soundness of them. And finally, Honorable Minister, I wish to speak on the third sector aspect of your ministry and the issue of outreach for philanthropic contributions from members of our diaspora in the developed world. Very important. We all know that remittances to developing countries, CARICOM countries, and ours, by our citizens and by the children of our citizens in developed countries, England, Canada, America, make up a significant aspect of our foreign exchange earnings, our gross domestic product, that barrels sent down and actual monies sent down by our relatives assist our families in this country, particularly at Christmas, the tradition of barrels coming in from overseas into the port for Christmas food, whether it's food, clothes, whatever else, to assist the sustenance and survival of our people. And I recall when I was in cabinet, certainly issues of legislation to put a statutory foundation for philanthropic contributions by Barbadians and well-wishers of Barbados to us was being muted. I'm not so sure where that is now, and I invite you, Honorable Minister, to speak to that and to speak generally as to where we are at in terms of thrust, in terms of policy, in terms of outreach for philanthropic contributions, which will assist us in operating our country, contributions to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. For instance, we know that persons such as Right Excellent National Hero Rihanna contributes to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and assists with that burden. But if the Honourable Minister can give the country, through this Parliament, an analysis of this aspect of his ministry. And I thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Mr. Chair, the matter of philanthropy falls within our ministry's mandate. In the lead up to the regathering of 2020, we started our work in conjunction with the Prime Minister's Office of setting a framework that would allow for philanthropic giving. We identified the major areas that we would target. Healthcare was one of those. Education was one of those. There was the commencement of the development of a portal, a technological solution that would allow persons from across the world, and persons in Barbados, to contribute financially. We had discussions also with the Ministry of Tourism, and coming out of that, there was the recognition that persons may want to contribute in ways other than financial, and the portal was then to incorporate persons who would want to donate their time or make donations in kind, paint, those kinds of things. The pandemic then struck, and much of that was put on the back burner. I'm happy to say, though, that it has come back to front burner, has been for a couple of months now. We are at the point where we're doing two things. One is that we're focusing initially, working with the Prime Minister's Office investment on the road project, which is reclaiming our Atlantic destiny, and the aspect of that program, which includes the work at the Newton burial ground for enslaved persons, as well as the digitizing of the National Archives. That is a project that requires substantial funding, and the investment side of the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment has been working closely with us to go through these steps that would allow for effective philanthropic giving. That includes both reactivating the portal, and that took some time because there seemed to have been a pretty large slit between the cup and the lip with respect to if there was a portal, where it was, how far advanced it was. We've managed to address that issue. And then there are some other legal issues with respect to setting up organizations, both in the areas where people will be giving donations, that is to say, countries like the US, countries like the United Kingdom, countries on the continent, and the continent meaning the continent of Africa, setting up structures. So I'll give an example. In the US, those organizations are referred to, the ones that we are speaking about, 501c3 organizations. And the mechanics of setting up such an organization in the US, we are in the process of actually doing it at the moment, working through the process. And then there needs to be a local counterpart organization, and we are in the process of engaging legal expertise on the correct form that should take. So all of that to say that the ministry is fully engaged, partnering with the investment division, like I indicated earlier, to make sure that Barbadians overseas in the diaspora, friends of Barbados, are able to contribute to the development of the country. We recognize that we do not have all of the resources necessary to do everything that we want to do. We also recognize that there are lots of people, as we say, out there who want to assist us. There has to be a mechanism that allows them so to do. That mechanism has to conform to the ethos of this government, which speaks to transparency, which speaks to accountability, which speaks to the rule of law. And so we are making sure that the structure, the infrastructure that is put in place to allow for effective giving is put in place so that we can have the benefits from that giving. We have also engaged with customs. That is an engagement that took place prior to 2020. We have not re-engaged as yet because we're working through these legal constructs, but we will re-engage with customs because there are a number of persons, including former representatives, diplomatic representatives abroad, who've complained that trying to give to Barbados seems more difficult than what Ronald Biggs did in the Great Train Robbery. It just seems very difficult to send things into Barbados and get them accepted. And so we recognize that that is an area that needs some attention. Customs recognizes that as well. Once we've worked through to a certain point on the legal side, we'll re-engage customs. Now, overarching all of that is continuing work on legislation for the third sector. That third sector legislation will include matters that speak to giving, to philanthropy, because one of the things we want to make sure happens is that third sector organizations in the country are in a position where they can receive donations as well from organizations of integrity or persons of integrity with a similar focus as some of our local organizations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. And Honorable Chairman, if you may just allow me just a minor issue. And obviously, the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs spoke last week at St. Peter's speech that he intends to bring new Immigration Act, new Citizenship Bill, I believe, as well, to Parliament this year. I certainly look forward to that. I think we all do, because all of that is tied in to, giving our capacity of Barbadians who live overseas, their children, grandchildren, the feeling and the facilitation to make philanthropic contributions to Barbados easier. Because as you said correctly, Honorable Minister, the impression is given that it is quite difficult and challenging to do so because of the red tape that we have right now. Thank you, Honorable Chairman.